Joe Fredericks here. This is a quick update before we get into the podcast. This is being recorded on Thursday, December 4th. There are charges coming likely as a result of the fire from Lutsen Resort in February 2024. The podcast you're about to hear is our original reporting. We will update in future episodes following any information from the State Fire Marshal or the Cook County Attorney's Office. Let's jump into the episode. It was quiet around Lutsen Resort the night it burned to the ground in early February 2024. There wasn't much snow that winter, and a winter without much snow meant the usually bustling outdoor scene in northeastern Minnesota was subdued. No matter how much snow there is, in early February, the busiest place on the north shore of Lake Superior is Lutsen Mountains, the ski resort nestled above Lutsen Resort in the Big Lake. Minnesota resident Johanna Jeanette was on vacation with her family, staying near the base of the ski hill. It was a Monday night, things were quiet around the ski hill, and so to mix things up, they decided to go to Lutsen Lodge for dinner.
And we walked into the lodge, it was very quiet.
There was barely anyone around when Johanna and her family entered the lodge on this particular Monday night. They did notice a roaring fire in the fireplace, not far from the front desk.
It was remarkable. We're like, wow, that is a big fire they've got going in the fireplace. And there was one person working behind the desk. We said hello to them. And then we walked over to the restaurant.
Johanna and her family didn't have a dinner reservation, but they assumed it wouldn't matter given how quiet things were on the North Shore, up the ski hill, and certainly inside the lodge.
The restaurant was deserted. It was completely quiet. And when we walked up to the host stand, the host said, yeah, I can get you a table. Do you know that we do a prefix menu? And so they had us look over the menu. And I think the reason they had us look at it is because it was so expensive. And we were on vacation and we thought, no big deal. We'll have dinner here. We'll do this prefix, even though it wasn't ideal.
It stayed quiet in the restaurant as Johanna and her family waited for the food to arrive.
We were the only table. We were the only table in the whole restaurant. And so we started ordering our food. About a half hour in, another table came and seated, another four top. We saw other people come up and ask for tables, and they would give them their spiel about the prefix. And most people just walked away at that point because it was pricey. It's a Monday night in the middle of February. You know, it's the price if you're going out somewhere fancy for Father's Day or a birthday or something like that.
Being that it was a Monday night in February, Johanna didn't dwell too much on the quiet atmosphere. Her daughter was 4 years old at the time, so they took walks around the lodge to break up the time.
I would walk her around the restaurant. I walked her down the hallway to the games room. That's where we saw the polar bear, which made a big impression on her. They've got a stuffed polar bear there. And we took a bunch of photos of her with the polar bear. And it was fine. We were there quite a while. Like, I want to say maybe 2 hours, 3 hours. We had dinner. It took a while.
After dinner, Johanna and her family left Lutsen Resort and went back up to their cabin near the base of the ski hill. They went to bed not too long after that. Early the next morning, Johanna woke up and had a strange message on her phone.
My father-in-law texted us to ask if we were okay because the lodge had burnt down. He didn't know we weren't staying right in the lodge itself. And at first we didn't believe him because we were just there the night before. And he said, no, the lodge burnt down. So yeah, our first thought was this is very odd timing. It seemed a little unbelievable. It definitely seems suspicious.
This is The Fire, a North Shore story. I'm Joe Fredericks, a journalist who lives near Grand Marais, Minnesota. I've been reporting on the February 6th, 2024 fire from the morning it was first reported. Leading up to the fire, the resort's owner, Bryce Campbell, had a vision to shift the resort from a family-friendly atmosphere where weddings, casual weekends, and a type of place where one might get a hamburger after a day on the slopes into something more high-end. Bryce wanted an upscale resort, more Manhattan than Duluth. High rollers, special occasions, that was the plan. Part of the vision included renovating the third floor of the lodge, the previously seldom utilized top floor of the main lodge building at the iconic resort. The renovation was scheduled for a completion in March, just a few weeks from the night of the fire. Bryce says the renovation was a big deal for the resort. It was going to help propel them through the slow winter, not just for Lutsen Resort, but for all the businesses along the North Shore, as the lack of snow was impacting visitation, tourism, and the local economy that winter.
I think a lot of people maybe don't even realize what we were in the middle of. March 1st was going to be our official launch of the third floor. That was extremely exciting for us. It was the first time the third floor was going to be open, I think, to have people actually stay in it since the 60s, I believe. Like, that was going to be a milestone for the lodge, and that was millions of dollars that went into that. You don't just have better things to do than literally burn money. And I don't want to sound like I'm money-oriented or money-driven. For me, I'm asset-driven. I love creating things. We put everything back in. That's what we've always done, but you don't make a painting and then burn it down.
Peter O'Toole is a photographer in Minnesota and an author. He's written 2 books about Edwin Lundy, who happens to be the architectural mastermind of what was Lutsen Resort before it burned to the ground. Peter is an expert of sorts when it comes to the history of Lutsen Resort and of Edwin Lundy.
Lundy in the 1940s began designing timber frame cabins on the north shore of Lake Superior, inspired by Middle Ages Scandinavian building types. And many of his clients allowed Lundy to follow his imagination and build cabins just as he wanted to.
Back in the 1940s, most of Lundy's clients had generous budgets to work with when it came to designing their cabins.
So Lundy just got these giant timbers and craftsmen, and he was able to do what he wanted to. And he built some beautiful stuff up there. By the time Lutsen was built, he'd already built a half dozen or so cabins within the vicinity of Lutsen Lodge.
Like many Minnesotans, Peter says that he was devastated by the news that Lutsen Resort was destroyed by a fire in 2024.
Pretty sad. It makes me kind of choke up a little to hear about it. And it's so sad. It's the community on the North Shore is devastated, but that ripples through the whole state. It ripples through a lot of places.
Although the February 2024 fire has and continues to make headlines across Minnesota, fire is not a new phenomenon to Lutsen Resort. And Bryce Campbell's quick to point out that he has the original plans for the lodge from when it was built after a previous fire in 1951. The lodge also burned in 1948. Campbell says that he's put a lot of money into the resort since he purchased it in 2018. Any speculation, of which there was an abundance following media reports of a failed inspection on the resort property by the state fire marshal, were not fair, he said. The remodel and renovations to the third floor alone, Campbell says, should show how serious he was about the future of the resort.
I just don't think people realize just how much we did to the place, what we were doing. And it was the first step of our whole redevelopment for the lodge, and we put a lot of work into it, and it was sad to see it all go.
Leading up to the fire, Bryce's vision for a high-end resort at Lutsen was, at best, being met with mixed reviews. Things were changing. People were accustomed to a more casual and welcoming environment at Lutsen Resort, including people who'd been coming there for many years and who had special memories there. Those people suddenly felt out of place. Among them is Naomi Thompson. Naomi's lived in Chaska, Minnesota, in the Twin Cities area for more than 2 decades. She's lived in Minnesota most of her life. Naomi and her husband visited the North Shore and the Lutsen area nearly every fall for many, many years. The annual trip coincided with their wedding anniversary in late September and provided many of the things they wanted to experience on an in-state vacation. Quiet spaces to relax, good food, beautiful natural scenery. Lutsen Resort was their go-to destination on the shore, and part of that, Naomi says, was based on something she connects to a well-known film from the 1980s.
This is so dorky, and I'm kind of embarrassed to admit it, but part of the reason I love Lutsen Lodge is because it reminded me of the movie Dirty Dancing, which was one of my favorite movies of all time. And it just kind of had that same vibe of, that retro family destination lodge in the woods. And so that was another connection that I had to it. And the similarities between the two were kind of cool. It takes place in the 60s, but it's about a young girl that falls in love with a guy that works at the lodge. They have dance lessons and they swim and they play in the lake. And it's just very similar in my own mind, probably. But it was just another way to connect to that place that was so special.
Naomi worked in TV news and production for many years in the Twin Cities. She then switched careers and started to work in hospitality, something she continues to do in the Twin Cities area. She knows good food and she knows what a good lodging experience should be like. And she saw that experience change over the years at Lutsen, and it started, she says, when Bryce Campbell became the owner.
I have to say that we weren't really keen on the changes. We didn't like the changes that came to the restaurant. It lost its charm. It was trying to be something it wasn't. The food was not nearly as good as it had been before. We so looked forward to that wild rice soup, and we had a couple of dishes on the menu that were our favorites, and it didn't click anymore. And we were kind of disappointed about that. And just the whole vibe of the lodge and Lutsen itself seemed to shift. We could tell that there was, different ownership and that it wasn't really locked into the Minnesota, up north experience that we were there for.
Naomi, like many others who had a personal connection to Lutsen Resort, says the fire hasn't destroyed her memories of the lodge, but it did create a sense of mourning. The loss of the lodge, she says, is tied directly to a sense of place.
I can vividly remember walking up the steps to the lodge and opening the screen door and the squeak of the door and the creak of the floor and the smell of the lodge and the fireplace. And it's just embedded in my memory and such a special place. And when I found out that morning that it had burned down, I saw some post on social media, I guess, but it really felt like we lost a friend. It was just like, I was out of town at work at the time, and I called my husband right away, and he's like, tell me you're kidding. Tell me this is not true. And then to see the pictures of what was left was absolutely devastating.
Brian Hansel is a photographer who lives near Grand Marais. He got his start on the North Shore working at Lutsen Resort about 20 years ago. Hansel worked on the activity staff at the resort, taking people kayaking in the summer and cross-country skiing in the winter. Hansel says the resort was a place where people could come to unwind and relax next to Lake Superior. It was also a place where people would celebrate weddings, anniversaries, and milestones of their lives. And before it was Lutsen Resort, the land and water here served as an important place for the people who live here.
A fire like this can serve to break a location from its history. Of course, the history of the land goes back further than the white Scandinavian settlers. Before the resort, the Poplar River served as a major Ojibwe canoe highway, an important route connecting Lake Superior to the inland waterways. When visitors put their feet into the water of the Poplar River, even if they didn't know it, they were connecting to all the people who traveled that route over the thousands of years that they did. The history of the land and the Ojibwe and their ancestors at Lutsen stretches back to the end of the Ice Age and the beginning of Lake Superior itself.
In looking at the building before it burned in February 2024, Hansel says the way Lundy designed the lodge embraced a timeless way of building that modern buildings seldom do.
It seemed eternal. It seemed to expand in a way that felt organic. We won't know what the future will bring until the current owner decides what to do. But the main lodge will live on in many of our memories. It meant a lot to us, and it's sad to see it gone.
Edward Venegas is the former general manager at Lutsen Resort. He says the vision of Bryce Campbell, the lodge's owner, to make the lodge itself a high-end destination resort was something that didn't take hold almost immediately. And among those who weren't impressed were local residents who lived along the North Shore.
That local community pub at pre-ski, hangout, games on the football games and other things on the TVs, all gone. And so we had lost, not even just metaphorically, we had lost the community in many ways.
Venegas says that Bryce was cold to any negative feedback he got from customers, including local residents and other guests who frequented the resort.
We were beginning to see value-related issues, meaning I paid this much, but I didn't get that much.
And how is he responding to that feedback?
We don't want those people back. They'll never come back. That's the person that we're trying to identify as not our customer anymore.
Venegas says that he started to notice changes in the resort's clientele during the summer of 2023. A decision by upper management, including Bryce, to no longer offer weddings at the resort was a major turning point. Fishing guides and those types of services were being discontinued as well. A kids camp that was part of the resort was shut down. The closing of the Poplar River pub inside the lodge had a particular sting for some local residents, as it was a great place to get a burger and hang out near Lake Superior on the long, dark nights of winter. As a local resident, I used to go there at least once a month during the winter. The wooden booths with the high backs reminded me of a favorite bar I frequented in Bend, Oregon when I lived there 20 years ago. Transported you to a place, even though it was only 20 miles down the road from my house. I also liked to play video games in the game room after eating my burger or splitting some nachos with friends. Venegas says it was all part of Bryce's vision to get rid of these things. He wanted high rollers, not locals splitting a check for $50 who would sit in the pub for a few hours on a weeknight. Venegas says the local residents who frequented the resort all reminded him of a certain class of people. The type who might drive a particular type of car, and Bryce had no time or energy for these people, Venegas says.
He's not a fan of Subarus, and Subaru demographics are someone that he doesn't like at all.
For his part, Bryce maintains that he was welcoming to locals and that the atmosphere in the lead up to the fire at Lutsen was more inviting than at any other time in the lodge's history.
I don't understand why it's interpreted sometimes as not welcoming. To me, I feel like Lutsen's more welcoming than it ever was. Like, when you look at it this way, or how I look at it, from my point of view is, when has Lutsen ever had a doorman? Like, we had a doorman to greet you right when you got there. Forbes Travel let us sign up for their training. We were doing some of the best training with our front of house staff that is out there in the world, kind of thing. If you look at the restaurant and, the amount of servers we assign per table, or like amount of tables, you're having catered service because they're only looking after 3 tables versus another restaurant where that server's probably looking after 5 to 10 tables. They're literally catering to your experience that entire night and spending lots of time with you to make sure you're having a great, welcoming evening. So when you use the kind of term like when locals don't feel like they're welcome anymore, it's like, well, that would mean that you're determining welcome by price. So that's kind of where I think I have a bit of a frustration with it is like, in reality, I think we made the place more welcoming than ever when it comes to service and experience and offerings. I don't think that a place should be considered, whether it's welcoming or not, by the price point.
Bryce says he didn't get a fair shake from the local residents of the North Shore when it comes to how he envisioned Lutsen Resort and what it could be, and what it had to offer under the changes that he was implementing.
I guess I'd have to put myself in the other shoes, but if the locals put themselves in my shoes, I would hope that they see that that's how we looked at it, not like we came in wanting to price out locals. If anything, and we kind of said that from the beginning, is we hope locals look at it as, hey, we have a place to go out and celebrate our anniversary once a year or our birthday once a year, and maybe you can't afford to eat there every day, but you can go there for your splurge-worthy events. We want it to be that place for the locals, is that place to go when you want an experience and you have a night that's worth the celebration.
Bryce says the vision for Lutsen Resort that he was manifesting was only in its infancy when it was destroyed by a fire. Before, in fact, it all went up in smoke. The fire and the aftermath, he says, have been devastating to his vision for what Lutsen was bound to become.
It just feels like everything it's kind of bad choice of words, but literally seeing everything you worked for go up in flames, it's pretty hard.
Coming up on The Fire, a North Shore story, we'll talk about financial challenges Lutsen Resort had leading up to the night of the fire. This podcast was written and produced by me, Joe Fredericks. Story editing by Julie Sensulo. Support for the podcast comes from Kickstarter contributions, courtesy of people like David McDonald, Don McKeever, Chris D. J. White, Connie with a K, Annie Passis, Mike Larson, Amy Terrell, Buck Benson, Jim McDonald, and dozens of others. This podcast is also supported by Clover Valley Electric, a family-owned electrical contractor serving Minnesota's North Shore from Duluth to Grand Marais and everywhere in between. Their team handles everything from service and troubleshooting calls to full new builds, underground power and fiber installations, as well as commercial work, including lighting replacements. So whether it's a lakeside cabin or a small business or a large resort property, they bring craftsmanship, safety, and integrity to every job. Clover Valley Electric, built for the North, powered by experience.